welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's basics video, we're going over something I get asked about all the time, and I honestly have been putting this video off for quite a while. We're going over interfacing today, guys. Now, the reason I've been putting off the interfacing video is because I am not an interfacing expert, and still to this day, after 3 years of making at least 2 bags every single week, I am learning about new interfacing and using it in new projects. So I really wanted to wait until I felt like an actual expert in interfacing, like I understood the structure of the glue and the material and how it all is woven together. And you know what? I might never ever get to that point because there are new interfacings coming out all the time. So what we're gonna do today is a little bit more informal. However, even though I'm not an expert, like I said, I make at least 2 bags every single week, and I've been doing that for about 3 years. So I know a little bit about interfacing. So I'm gonna share with you what I know. I'm sure some of you guys know a lot more than me. I know some of you guys know types of interfacing that I don't know about. So we're just gonna kind of go over it in a more informal way. And if there's anything you can add, make sure you leave it down in the comment section down below. The structure of this video is gonna go like this. First, I'm going to go over the interfacing I use all the time. So this is the interfacing I buy with at least 10 yards at a time. So I buy bolts of this interfacing because I use it so much. We're gonna go over that. And then we're gonna go over the interfacing that I have, but I don't use a lot. Like I use them in very specific projects. So we'll go over that. And then at the end, we're gonna go over a Q&A. I actually reached out on social media on Facebook and on Instagram, and I asked everyone, hey, if you have any interfacing questions, let me know. And within just a couple hours, I had dozens and dozens of questions, and they are all really good questions. So we're gonna go over that as well. With the interfacing, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about what we use it for, what kind of projects we use it with, and then I'm also gonna show you how we fuse it, because that's like the biggest thing we have is this stuff isn't sticking. Like, how do we get it to stick to the material? So we'll go over that as well. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions? Guys, lots of questions, I know. Questions, tips, comments, tricks, whatever you have, suggestions, links, leave them down in the comment section. This is another one of those videos, kind of like the Cam Snaps video, where I'm just gonna throw out as much information as I can, but I'm really relying on you guys to also add to the discussion down in the comment section, because I know many of you do make more than 2 bags a week and have been doing this for a lot longer than 3 years, so you have a lot of advice as well. One thing I want to note is that I don't have access to all the interfacing from all over the world. So I have actually had a lot of discussions with friends in Africa, with friends in Australia and in the UK who don't have access to the same interfacing that we do here in the US. And so they ask if this other brand or these other numbers from this other brand are similar. And the thing is I just don't know. And I've even tried to order the same material so I can compare it, and I can't even order it. So if you are in any of those other countries, leave comments. Please, 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 please. I know a lot of you guys are experts. You have had access to all the types of interfacings in the different regions, and you can provide some comparisons. So please leave it down below. All right, guys, let's get started. First thing we're gonna do is talk about what I use most. All right, so when you buy a lot of interfacing, it comes a lot of ways. So let's go over that. All right, top interfacing. We've all used it. We've all loved it, maybe. Pellon SF101, also known as Pellon Shapeflex. You can see I buy this by the bolt. I guess my local place didn't have the bolt for this because this says licensed character Snow White Dwarf. This is obviously not Snow White fabric, but this is Pellon SF101, also known as Shapeflex. This is kind of what we all start with. This is the interfacing we will put on quilt cotton. If it frays, if it stretches, it needs to be interfaced. We're making bags here, people, not clothes. So what this does, this prevents your material from stretching. It prevents it from fraying. It adds a little bit of beef to your material. So if you have a drapey quilt cotton, if you have a lawn material like Liberty of London, if you have cotton lycra, which is thicker but super stretchy, this is also gonna add some beef to your material, which is nice. I would say it puts like a quilt cotton almost on the level of like a canvas. You know, it doesn't add a lot of thickness and a lot of structure, but it adds some. It's not drapey anymore. Now it's more of a material we would actually want to use for bags. So let's give this a go. I got a bunch of scraps of fabric, I got my ironing mat, and I got my iron. Let's get it all juiced up and test it out. Okay, so I have some quilt cotton material, and I'm just going to cut off a piece of this so I can use more of this. Also, these Kai, what are they? Kai 7230. These are my absolute favorite scissors. I have a lot of scissors. These ones are the best. So I'm just going to cut this real quick. So now I just have a piece of quilt cotton. This is also known as cotton woven. It's just loosey-goosey, super fraying material, right? So we're going to give it a press real quick. Always press your material before you attach the interfacing, because what can happen is if it's all wrinkly, kind of folding in on itself, you also want to use steam. My iron is very loud. If it's all crinkled and stuff like that, and then you attach the interfacing on top of it, sometimes those creases will stay, and the interfacing is flat, and so if you put it on a wrinkled surface, it's just going to press into a wrinkled piece of material, and then it's very difficult to flatten out. So always press your material first. So now here is my woven interfacing. Now remember, this is Pellon SF101 Shapeflex. This is not the only woven interfacing I use, and it's also not the one I suggest the most. So we're gonna go over that in just a moment. So I'm gonna cut off a little piece of my SF101. Now SF101, you can fuse it from the front or the back. Both is preferable. Doing it on both sides is the way I prefer to do it. So I'm gonna flip my material over to look at the back of it. I'm gonna take my woven interfacing, and I'm just going to lay it where I need it. Now, with woven interfacing, you might be using a lot of it. If you have a big bag and you're using a lot of quilt cotton, you might want to use a lot of woven interfacing. So, do you attach it and then cut out the patterns? What do? What's the process? Do you cut the quilt cotton first and then attach the... So this is what I do, okay? This is just my preference. I will press my quilt cotton really nice, and then I'll use my pattern pieces to lay it out on my quilt cotton, and then I'll trace out my pattern pieces with a marker, and then I will cut out those pattern pieces. So now I have a quilt cotton piece of my pattern, right? And that's what I have, but I can't just use that because it will stretch and it will fray and it will make me a not happy sewer. So then what I do, I'll have my pattern piece just like this, and I will lay it on my ironing board, on my pressing mat, whatever you're using. I'll lay it out wrong side up, and then I will take my woven interfacing and I will drape it over my pattern pieces. So if I have multiple pattern pieces, I'll have them all laid out all over my cutting mat, right? So I'll have this over here, and then I'll have another one here, another one here. I'll have them all laid out, and then I just take my woven interfacing and I drape it over as many as I can at once, and then I press it all from the back. Once I have all of my pattern pieces pressed from the wrong side with the woven interfacing up, I'll then take them, flip it over, and I will cut around the woven interfacing. So I'm using my quilt cotton pattern pieces as my pattern pieces now, right? And I just cut right along the outside of them. So you know what, let's just go ahead and do that. So let's say I need a smaller piece because I just don't want to use a lot of material. Let's say this right here is my pattern piece, and you know, I have a whole bunch of them, okay? But to save on scraps, we're just gonna use one. So then I take my woven interfacing, and I don't cut out the pattern pieces for my woven interfacing before I adhere it. I just take it, drape it over, and I, you know, try to be thoughtful and use as little as possible, but I'll drape it over my pattern piece just like that. And then using high heat and a lot of steam. High heat and a lot of steam and time, okay? We're gonna go over pressing a little bit at the end of this video, as some of the questions were about. But I use just a regular iron. This is a Beatrice iron. It spits everywhere. I don't know if I'd recommend it or not. Irons are irons, they're difficult. But you can see I'm doing this for a while. I mean, at least 30 seconds. I'll wait till it beeps at me. But you wanna press it for a while. It might seem like it's good, but it's not. You need to press it for quite a while. See, there we go, now it's beeping. Lots of heat, lots of steam. And then what I do is I lift this up, peel it up, let it cool a little bit before you really mess around with it. But once it's cool, then I will use the piece that's already on there, and I just cut right outside the fabric. See? Just like that. And I'll do this for all four sides, just cutting right outside the fabric. I'm not cutting the fabric, just right outside of it. Just like that edge of the fabric is my tracing line, right? Cut all the way around it. And now I have my piece of material with the SF101 fused to the back. However, it's not perfectly fused yet. Now what I do is I take this material, I lay it on my ironing board or pressing mat, right side up, and I fuse it again from the front. I had a lot of questions about specifically Pellon SF101 bubbling. After you turn out your bag, it's come unattached from the material and you can't get it attached again. You gotta fuse the life out of it. I mean, you just really want that glue to melt and then like soak into the fibers of the fabric, you know, and that just requires time. It requires high heat, a lot of steam, unless you're using a heat press. Heat presses have an advantage of very high heat, consistent high heat all over the same area, and a lot of pressure. They don't need steam. So it's one of those things, like heat presses don't really have to follow the rules of an iron. With an iron, the amount of pressure that's being put down onto the material is the weight of the iron and then any force you're putting down on it. And you just can't be as consistent as a heat press can. Heat presses are like two big sheets of metal. The top sheet is what gets hot, and then you push it down and it's consistent heat. It's all consistent heat and pressure on a material. And that kind of trumps steam. You know what I mean? Like it's better than steam. So we're not going to get too much into heat presses. I'm going to assume everybody here uses an iron. If you have a heat press, then you already know what advantage you have. But we're going to just go over irons today. I just want to make a quick note of the heat press though. So as you can see, when I use Pellon SF101 or any sort of woven interfacing, I steam it, press it from the front and the back. I do both sides and really well. Like I said, let that iron beep because it's been down for a while. You know what I mean? You need to do a lot of heat, a lot of steam for a good amount of time on the front and the back. That should help with the bubbling situation, okay? So this is Shapeflex, right? You can see now, here's my original piece. See how it's like, put a finger underneath it, right? And it's like super drapey, crumply. That's what it is. Here is it with Shapeflex. You can see it doesn't quite drape as much. It's more firm. It has a nice feel to it. To me, it feels similar in weight to a canvas material. A canvas material is just like thicker thread, looser weave, but it feels thicker, you know? So now this is a great material for bag making because you have a little bit of structure to it. You don't have to worry about stretching or fraying, and you might actually enjoy what you're making because you're not fighting your fabric so much. All right, so this is the SF101 on a quilt weight cotton. I also want to talk about using it on cotton lycra, and then like I used to think that cotton lycra and like a jersey were the same. Just like with woven, every material is different. It might all be called the same thing, but depending on who manufactured it, the weight of the thread, the type of dye they use, like it all can be totally different. So that's, unfortunately, there's no like use this on this every single time because it really just depends on the specific material you're using. But I wanted to show you. This is considered a jersey knit, and it's kind of lightweight, very stretchy, very cute, but very lightweight. This is a cotton lycra, and it's similar. It's like a jersey. It's very stretchy, pretty lightweight, but it's a little bit denser. It's a little bit like denser. You know what I mean? It's a little bit more dense than this one. It's a little bit heavier, kind of thicker than this one. But I want to show you, this is also where we want to use our SF101, okay? So let me cut off a couple pieces of this. I'm actually just going to cut off the white selvage because I'm not going to use that. So I have the loosey-goosey one, and then let's also cut off a piece of our very, very fun blue one. Just a small piece, and I'll probably use it somewhere. All right, so you can see with stretchy material, it curls. You might not have to worry about it fraying so much, but it will curl up on you, which makes it a nightmare to make a bag with. But that's where the SF101 comes in. So first of all, I don't even mess with this super rolled edge. I will give it a press as best I can. There we go. But oh man, look at this. It just rolls up everywhere. See if I can press out that roll. I don't think I'll be able to, but I'll try. Again, I'm using high heat and a lot of steam, and you gotta be careful when pressing stuff because it just stretches, so you don't want to put down a lot of force. Let's go ahead and give a press to the cotton lycra as well. So here we go. I'm just going to press the back of the cotton lycra, trying to get these folds out of here. But to be honest, these folds are on the very, very edge of the material, which is considered the selvage. That's not something I would use anyways, so I'm not that concerned about those folds. So then I'm just going to drape over, once again, my woven interfacing. In this case, it's Pellon SF101. I'm just going to drape it over both my pattern pieces and fuse it from the back side. So my SF101 is glue side down, fabricy side up, and I'm just going to fuse this with a lot of heat, a lot of steam to the back of my stretchy material. Once I have that fused well from the back, I'm going to lift this up, flip it over, and I'm going to cut out my pieces. Now, like I said, super rolled area I wouldn't use anyways. But I'm just going to kind of cut out my pieces. And when you're cutting out your pattern pieces with this, you don't want to leave any of this interfacing with the glue side up, because if you iron over that, it's just going to put glue all over your iron, and that's no fun. So make sure when you're tracing your pattern pieces, you really cut off all of those raw edges of your interfacing. No glue on the iron. So cut out both of these. Okay, so now we have the interfacing attached to both of these. And you can see they both have the same interfacing, but there is a difference in structure. You see how this one right here on my right, it just drapes like that, and then this one over here, the cotton lycra, it doesn't have as much drape. It is firmer, it is thicker. So as something to think about with your material. So cotton lycra especially needs to be fused again from the front, okay? You gotta fuse it from the front as well. So after you have it all cut out, you don't have any glue left on the edges, kind of facing right side up, you're gonna fuse it again, high heat, lots of steam from the front. And you shouldn't have to worry about anything stretching, and you just gotta leave the iron down. I mean, I know, it's getting hot in here, guys. This steamy iron is making it hot in here. All right, so here we go. Both of them are perfectly fused. Now we can use them for bags. And I get asked, like, okay, well, I put the SF101 on my cotton lycra. Does that mean I don't have to use Decovil Light? Do I not have to? We'll get to that. You still have to use those things, okay? If the pattern calls for it, you still have to use it. This is just getting you to a starting point, right? When you add the woven interfacing to these materials, whether it's quilt cotton, cotton lycra, anything like that, now the material is ready to be used as if you were using vinyl or waterproof canvas or anything else. Your material is just ready to go now, okay? So I know we went over a lot with the SF101. We're not going to go over that much detail in all of them. This is what you need. This is your water, right? You got to have water every single day. You got to drink your water. Please make sure you're drinking your water. You got to have water. This is your water. This is just something that you need. Now, do you need SF101? No. But you do want woven interfacing. Now, let me tell you my favorite woven interfacing. My current favorite woven interfacing comes to us from Monica over at Castine Handcrafted. She has this material called Sewfuse. And again, I order 10 yards at a time. And I did not order this that long ago, and I am running low. This stuff is so good. How is it different than Pellon Shapeflex? Well, let's look at it. Let's just hold them side by side here, okay? You can feel the difference, but obviously you can't because you're on the other side of the camera. So I will do my best to explain the difference. This feels luxurious. It just does. The glue is nice. The weave on the woven part of it is really nice. It's kind of more looser and less stiff than the Pellon SF101. The biggest thing I've noticed in difference between this is that, yeah, Pellon SF101, even with all the double fusing and stuff like that, you might still, after, smushing your bag through a tiny hole to turn it out right side out, it might still come unattached from the material, which is so frustrating because especially with something like cotton lycra, you're going to have bubbles. And if you can't refuse it because of the structure of your bag or because it just won't fuse again, right? You don't want any problems with a bag when you're done with it. It needs to be perfect because you put too much work into it, right? You're not gonna, I don't know if you will. I have never had that problem with Sewfuse. Sewfuse is just, it feels nice. It feels really nice. It adheres really nice. The glue's really nice. The glue soaks into the fibers of your fabric really well. I don't know how to explain the biggest difference between it, but I highly, highly recommend this. Now, there are so many woven interfacings out there. There are so many one-off brands, companies that we know and love, new companies. They're all coming out with something fused, and I'm sure they're all wonderful, and I'm sure they're all very similar. The biggest difference between them is probably the type of weave on the back, the type of material used on the backing, the type of glue used, the amount of glue used. Is it like a smooth glue? Is it a gritty glue? How is it thick? There's probably a lot of chemical differences, very minor chemical differences. And I haven't tried them all, but I can say I use Sewfuse a lot. When I'm out, I will be buying more Sewfuse, but before I would buy more Pellon Shapeflex. That's just my personal opinion. However, there's one place to get Sewfuse, and that's from Monica. And if she sells out, you're going to have to wait until she gets some more in. She works really hard to keep it in stock, but she does sell out. So I have the Shapeflex on, you know, on hand, ready to go if I need to use it because I can't get more Sewfuse. That's just my personal opinion on this material here. Okay, the next material I use very, very frequently is Decovil Light. Now, you can buy Decovil Light from a lot of places. Pellon has a version, I think it's Pellon 525, I think that's what it's called. It's Decovil Light. You can get it from everywhere. I'm pretty sure when it comes to Decovil Light, it's the same stuff everywhere. No matter what it's called, no matter who's selling it, it's all the same stuff. It's all Decovil Light. Decovil Light is secret magic sauce. It's like the secret ingredient, you know what I mean? Like when you're like, man, this tastes so good. Why does it taste so much better than other things that are the same thing? Because it's the secret ingredient. It's so good. It takes your woven material and it turns it into something like a vinyl. Oh, love it. So let's try it out. All right, so Decovil Light is great because you can apply it to anything, pretty much anything. It makes everything better. It's like salt. It makes everything better. So I'm going to grab the pieces we already have that have the woven interfacing attached to them. Now, quill cotton, woven interfacing, Decovil Light. That sandwich, you got some good stuff you're working with there. That's good stuff. It makes your quill cotton like vinyl, like leather. It feels so good. I love it. One quick note I want to mention about Decovil Light. So here's like a scrap piece I have. I always have a lot of scraps. I keep all of them. It can be not inexpensive. It can be kind of pricey. And it can also be very hard to find sometimes. For some reason, all of us decide to buy all of it. And then there's none left. And we're on a shortage for months and it's a pain. Decovil Light, sewing over this depends on your machine. Personally, I sew on a Bernina 770. And it is a pretty tough cookie. It's a pretty tough machine. So I can actually take my Decovil Light and use it full pattern piece all the way in the edges of the seam, sew over it, fold it, top stitch it, no big deal. However, when you have a lot of folds and then top stitching, it's going to add quite a bit of beef to your material. So a lot of times in patterns, they'll actually suggest you cut your Decovil Light smaller. So it's not in the seam. So you don't sew over it, okay? I do suggest that as well, but you have to make sure you have your woven interfacing going to the seams or else it's going to be a mess. So yeah, Decovil Light, if you're not quite sure how your machine's going to handle it, just make sure you cut it so that it's not in the seam. So if your seam allowance is a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you're just going to cut it down 1/4 inch on all the sides of your pattern so that it's not in the seam. If a little bit gets sewn over, you're going to be fine. You just don't want a ton of it in there because it beefs it, bulks it, and then when you top stitch it, it's like, why is my needle breaking? It's because there's too much stuff there. But let's fuse it, okay? Decovil Light, you fuse it from the front of the fabric. That's the rule, okay? And with Decovil Light, I cut the pattern piece first and then fuse it. I don't do it like I did with the woven interfacing where I just kind of drape it and fuse it and then cut what's left. I cut the pattern piece first and then I fuse it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually looking at the back of my Decovil Light. And Decovil Light, it is like a paper on one side and then it's like a really slippery, shiny side. That's your glue. So the paper side, I'm going to use that side. I'm just going to kind of figure out what I need to cut for my pattern piece here. So let's just cut it out. And just like with any fusible interfacing, you don't want your iron touching the glue, okay? Heat press, regular iron, don't let it touch the glue. This glue is not something you joke around about. All right, so what I do is this. I take my Decovil Light and I lay it, see, glue shiny side up. And then I'll take my woven material, not vinyl. We're not talking about vinyl right now. We're talking about quill cotton, cotton lycra, canvas, any sort of woven material. And you're gonna lay that right side up over your Decovil Light so it matches. There we go, or maybe like this. Something like that, there we go. All right, so once you have that all lined up, then you take your iron, lots of heat, lots of steam. You're gonna hear me say that a lot today, lots of heat, lots of steam. Put it on a t-shirt, right? Because we're gonna say it a lot. Lots of heat, lots of steam from the right side of your material because it has to access the glue. And that's something with all interfacing, you got to think about what's the easiest way for that heat and that steam to access the glue. A lot of the interfacing like Decovil Light, it has such a firm backing, that paper-like kind of cardboard backing. It can't really penetrate that. It can't get through it to access the glue the best. When you have a woven material means all of the little things are woven together, right? Like all of the threads are woven together, which means there's gaps in between them. air can get through that. Heat, steam can get through the gaps in between the threads that are woven together to make your woven material, so it can reach the glue. The back of the paper, it has a very hard time reaching that glue. It can, but it's gonna have a hard time reaching it. It's gonna be easier to do it from the front. Now look at this. Oh man, this is like, now it's like a piece of leather. Now it's like a piece of vinyl. And now you can make really structured bags using this material. I love Decovil Light. I think 100% you gotta have some sort of woven interfacing. Sewfuse is my recommendation, but anything you can find. Woven interfacing, you gotta have it if you're using any sort of quilt cotton. If you're only using vinyl and leather and stuff, then you don't need it. Decovil Light, I would also have at least like 3 yards on hand. I'd always have a few yards of it on hand in case you decide, you know what, this needs a little bit. It's like, it's the secret ingredient. It's the pepper and the salt. It's something that maybe the pattern doesn't call for, but you know what, I could use a dash of Decovil Light. I would always have it on hand because I'll throw it in and be like, the pattern calls for Fusible Fleece, I'm gonna use Decovil Light. The pattern calls for foam, I'm gonna use Decovil Light. You can use Decovil Light in place of those things most of the time. Fusible Fleece, foam. It's gonna make the bag less squishy. We'll go over that when we talk about foam and Fusible Fleece. That adds a little bit of squishiness, a cuddliness to the bag. It's gonna make it not have that cuddliness, but it's gonna have like a chicness, right? It's gonna be like, oh, this is something that's in a glass case. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm like going overboard with the Decovil Light, but I absolutely love it. I made sure I always had it. When there was a shortage of Decovil Light and we could not find it anywhere, I went online and I'm pretty sure I ordered this roll of Decovil Light from Germany. So I will do whatever it takes to have the Decovil Light. So Decovil Light is also something I always have on hand no matter what. Guys, we're not even halfway through and my curls are gone because of all the heat and the steam. All right, let's talk about this big guy over here. This is foam. This is not fusible. This is not a fusible material. There is fusible foam. I don't like it. It doesn't stick that well, and I don't think you need it. I don't think you need fusible foam. Foam doesn't have to stick to your material. It's not gonna look bad if it doesn't stick to your material. Now, foam is a really, really popular option, especially for a lot of beginner patterns. It's going to add a firmness to your bag without a lot of extra, I mean, it does add bulk, but it doesn't add like a sticky bulk. So like with Decovil Light, depending on your machine, if you have layers and layers of material with Decovil Light, and then they're, cause like, so you'll sew 2 layers of this together, right? But then when you flip it out, you're gonna have like 4 layers because you're gonna have both sewn together and then you're gonna top stitch over that. And that's a lot of gumminess in your needle. It's just gonna, you know what I mean? When you're sewing and your needle tries to come up, but it like bangs up and it pulls the material with it, it's because the needle is sticking to all the sticky stuff in Decovil Light. Also with Decovil Light, from what I'm told, you need to wait 30 minutes before you use it. That's just what I've heard. 30 minutes before you use it. But with foam, you're not gonna have that problem. With foam, your needle can go through this very easily. It's not dense. It's puffy, it's thick, but it's not dense. You can very easily sew over this. So when you use foam, the hardest thing about foam is that you really don't want it in as much of the seam as possible. So a lot of times with foam, we will have a bigger seam allowance. We will baste it into place, we will sew it into place, and then we'll kind of cut the foam around the seam so that when we have to top stitch and stuff, we don't have layers. We don't have 4 layers of foam we're trying to top stitch through. However, top stitching through 4 layers of foam is actually going to be easier on your machine than top stitching through 4 layers of Decovil Light. That's just from my experience. So foam is really great for beginners. It's in a lot of beginner bag patterns because it provides that really fun structure without having to have, the Decovil Light, which is kind of expensive, and having to worry about sticking and stuff like that. So I do love foam. I especially love when we quilt it. So you have your cotton lycra that's already interfaced again with the woven interfacing. Remember, we just put it on there. We don't even think about using it without the woven interfacing. So we have the cotton lycra with the woven interfacing, and then we put it on our foam and we quilt it. We do some nice just lines, just crisscrosses, little squares, something like that. Simple quilting, and then you cut out your pattern piece after you've quilted it. So that's just one thing I want to note is you don't cut your pattern piece and then quilt it onto the foam because it's going to be too small. When you quilt something, especially with the foam, you're going to shrink the design. So you take your material, make sure your material is bigger than it needs to be, you fuse it onto your woven interfacing, you put it on your foam. Maybe you're going to use some spray glue, some spray adhesive, like 505 spray, that's what I use, some temporary spray adhesive, spray it on, get your material to stick to the foam, take it to the machine, do a fun quilt design on it, and then take your pattern piece and cut out your pattern piece. And now, watch out, Vera Bradley, right? I mean, you're gonna have just the most beautiful quilted bags. I absolutely love doing that, especially on bigger bags. You might not want to use this on really, obviously you don't want to use foam on like a wallet or anything, like a really small thing, because it's too much bulk and too tiny of a space. But on like a bigger bag, oh, a weekender bag, a duffel bag, love, love, love foam. So yeah, foam is something I always have on hand because it just really is something nice. You don't need this much foam. I will say I bought this huge bolt of foam. I don't even know how many yards it is. I got mine. My foam that I use is from By Annie. It's called Soft and Stable. Highly, highly recommend. Wouldn't recommend anything else. That's all. By Annie, Soft and Stable. End of story. They have it in this color. They have it in black. You don't need anything else. I forgot how many yards this is, but it's huge. You can get them in these big rolls, but this has lasted me. I've had it for probably 10 years, so you don't need this. You would also definitely want to use foam for any type of bag that's going to be holding something that can break easily. Camera bags, laptop bags, anything like that. You want to put the foam in it. Foam is actually it's just a really great thing to add to most bags because you don't know what people are going to use them for. So, highly suggest having foam on hand, but you don't need this much. All right, the last interfacing that I always have a lot on hand of is Fusible Fleece. Now, Fusible Fleece, man, I was looking at my questions. You guys do not like Fusible Fleece. And I know, I don't either. Until you know how to use it. So we're going to go over that. So there's actually a surprisingly large amount of different types of Fusible Fleece. I use Pellon TP971F, which is also known as Thermolam Plus. Okay, which I think means that it's mostly used for like heated things, like oven mitts, you know, things that are going to have some heat on it. I think it'll protect things from the heat. I just like it the best because I feel like it fuses the best. It doesn't kind of shed. It's just, to me, I like it better than just regular Fusible Fleece. So this is the only Fusible Fleece I actually have right now. So let's go ahead and cut off a piece of our Fusible Fleece and see how to fuse it. Okay, so a lot of times patterns will call for you to adhere Fusible Fleece to just the quilt cotton. They'll say, no woven interfacing, no SF101, just adhere it to the quilt cotton, which can be kind of a pain. So here is my piece of quilt cotton, and here's my Fusible Fleece. Especially with Thermolam Plus, you don't want to fuse it from the back because it's going to prevent the heat from going through it. So you're going to want to take your Fusible Fleece and lay it gritty glue side up. Also, if you're fusing it onto a woven material like quilt cotton or something like that, it's just going to have better access to the glue if it goes through this side. So then you're going to take your material and lay it right side up over it. So the back of the material is against the glue side. This is another product, just like Decovil Light, where I do suggest you cut out your pattern pieces from the Fusible Fleece before you adhere it to your quilt cotton. So if you want to not cut out the pattern pieces from your quilt cotton, that's fine. Just cut out the patterns from your Fusible Fleece, adhere to the quilt cotton, and then cut and trace. You know what I'm saying? So we have the Fusible Fleece underneath the quilt cotton, and you want to use high heat, a lot of steam, and you want to keep the iron moving. Because if you don't keep the iron moving, let's see if I can make it happen. What happens is as the glue melts and starts contracting, it sucks your material in and you get these lovely little ripples that don't come out. So I'm trying to see if I can make it happen. I tell you, every single time I use it, it happens. And when I try to make it happen, it doesn't happen. So you can see, I'm just kind of holding it in one spot. I'm not moving it around a whole lot. I have heat and steam. My iron steams more when I lift it up than it does when I put it down. It's a problem we will address. But you can see, you see this right here? This like rippling, this bubbling? That is a problem that we have all the time. For some reason, when the glue like contracts and melts, everything just starts mushing together. So you have to keep your iron moving. You cannot keep it in one spot. If you let it sit in one spot, so like when we're adhering other interfacings, we'll have the iron kind of sit in one spot for a few seconds and move it, and then move it, and then move it. Fusible Fleece is not like that. You gotta keep it moving, okay? What else is gonna help with preventing the ripples is having your material already interfaced with some sort of woven interfacing. The extra barrier here is going to help prevent the wrinkles, but even then it can still happen, so you gotta keep the iron moving. So I don't know if you can see this here, but it's all wet. My iron. But I don't know if you can see, but there are like some like wrinkles, ripples, and stuff like that when my material was perfectly flat when I put it down. So let's try another piece. I'm gonna go ahead and cut some of the same exact woven material, and I'm gonna add some woven interfacing to it real quick. and then we will attach the Fusible Fleece to that. So you can see I have my quilt cotton. It's so wet in my woven material, and I'll just adhere this real quick. Okay, so here is my quilt cotton with the SF101 on the back of it. Here is my Fusible Fleece. I'm just gonna cover this up. You know, I'm gonna trim it down because I don't want to make my iron any worse. There we go. So I've got Fusible Fleece, glue side up, my woven material, right side up, and then let's just give it a good press. So you can see I'm moving it around. And as I'm moving around, I mean, I'm pushing down. I'm adding pressure to this. I'm not just like lightly moving it around. I am pushing it down because I want it to stay flat. Okay, there we go. So now I have my Fusible Fleece attached to the back. It's very hot. It's very hot. So be careful. But Fusible Fleece also, in my experience, is one of those things you kind of want to let it sit for a while. So when it's hot, if you peel out the back of it, you can just rip it right off because that glue is still melted. I mean, that makes sense, right? The glue's still all melty and hot. You want the glue to harden. So I do suggest about 15 minutes after you attach your Fusible Fleece, put it to the side, let it rest. It should be nice and flat. Fusible Fleece, though, too, is if you adhere the Fusible Fleece and you look at it and it is a big, stinking, wrinkled mess, you just rip it off. Just rip off the Fusible Fleece. Give your fabric a good press. If you didn't add woven interfacing, maybe go ahead and add some SF101, some Sewfuse to the back of it, and then try again, okay? I know, Fusible Fleece can be a pain, I know, but it is one of those things when you add it, it makes the bag so much fun. So this is the nice thing about Fusible Fleece. It's kind of like the middle ground between Decovil Light and foam. So remember, Decovil Light, chic, leather, vinyl, vogue, right? Foam, so squishy, like a pillow. We love it, right? Fusible Fleece is kind of like in between that. It's going to add a nice, clean structure to it, but also a little bit of squish. It's like a blanket. So Fusible Fleece is a great, great option. It's just one of the more challenging interfaces to adhere. So those are the 4 interfacings I always have on hand. Some sort of a woven interfacing. I prefer Sewfuse. Decovil Light, 100%. Foam, Fusible Fleece. I like to use the Thermolam Plus. Try out different ones. Maybe don't buy 10 yards of Thermolam Plus and then be like, I don't like this one. Okay, maybe just get like a half a yard of it. Try a half a yard of some of the other types as well. You might have one that works best with you. It does also work really well with heat presses because, again, I think it's that pressure. I think it's that consistent, like tight pressure that a heat press will put on the material, which prevents the shrinking and stuff. I don't know. I'm not a scientist when it comes to these things. Let's move on. All right, next we're going to go through all the other interfacings. I actually have quite a few. All the other types of interfacings that I have because a pattern called for it, but it's not something I normally keep on hand. This first one's kind of a middle between it. So this is Decovil Heavy. Decovil Heavy is essentially 2 layers of Decovil Light, but it's just 1 layer of Decovil Heavy. I think it's also Pellon 526, I believe. I might have my Pellon numbers backwards. I apologize if so. Decovil Heavy is nice and firm, though. It is a firm interfacing. It is mostly used in the base of bags. It's going to provide lots of structure, or it can also be used as the form for a wallet. I love it. I absolutely love Decovil Heavy. I feel like it's really easy to work with. I have sewn over it. I haven't had a problem with that. It's not something you want to use everywhere, but if you want a very structured bag, this is going to be the way to go. I don't know if you guys remember, but we did like a drink caddy, like a 6-bottle drink caddy. It's not cardboard, but it's just, it's so good. You're going to fuse it just like you fuse your Decovil Light. You want to fuse it from the front of the fabric. Now let's talk about this. If you're using vinyl, because especially Decovil Light isn't always attached to vinyl. You can add Decovil Light to vinyl, and it's nice. It's good stuff. It's a secret sauce. But Decovil Heavy is oftentimes suggested to be attached to a vinyl bottom. So let's talk about that. All right, so here is some vinyl that I have. Now, this is an embroidery design on it, so it's just vinyl. You don't want to put your iron on the front of this vinyl, like iron to vinyl. That is not going to work out well for you. You're going to ruin your vinyl, and you might also ruin your iron. Don't do that. So, in this case, you do want to fuse from the back, but you also don't really want your iron to touch the back of this. Now, there's nothing on here. Your iron should be okay touching the back of the... I don't like doing it, though. I don't like doing it. You'll notice that with a lot of different interfacings. When the iron touches the back of the interfacing, it's not good. So let me show you how I do this. So I have this piece of Decovil Heavy here, and I'm going to fuse it onto the back of a piece of vinyl. What you want is a scrap piece of fabric that is big enough to completely cover your interfacing. So we have wrong side of our vinyl, and then the glue side of our Decovil Heavy is on the wrong side, and then the paper side of the Decovil Heavy is facing up. We take a scrap piece of material, lots of heat and lots of steam, and we're going to fuse from the back of the Decovil Heavy. You don't have to worry about keeping it moving or anything. It's not like Fusible Fleece. You can put it in one spot for a while. You just really want to get as much of that juicy, steamy heat as possible into the glue so that it like dissolves and melts and then soaks up into that fabric-y backing of your vinyl. You know, it's always good if you have a visual of what's going on, and then I feel like it works out better. I don't know. So we've got our Decovil Heavy nice and stuck to the back of this. Oh yeah, and then the vinyl is fine on the front. You see that? You can see where the Decovil Heavy is. Oh yeah. And now you just put some purse feet in there. You set that bag down and it is in good shape. You don't have any smushing or sag. You don't have a saggy bottom. Nobody wants a saggy bag bottom, right? It's perfect. It's ready to go. Oh, I gotta make something with that. That looks really good, doesn't it? So this happens to me all the time, so I just want to throw it out there for any of you guys who have it happen to you as well. Let's say you're working with Decovil Heavy. You have it attached to the base of your bag. Everything is looking so good. You're sewing it all together. Oh, this is going to be amazing. And then you are shoving that bag through that hole because you're birthing it, you know. And as you're shoving it, that Decovil Light, it is just peeling right off of the back of your vinyl. Oh, right? First of all, if you have purse feet installed, that's going to help. You always want to install your purse feet through the vinyl, through the Decovil Heavy, because then it's holding that Decovil Heavy in place. It's okay if it comes out a little bit. But if you don't have something like that, you're like, no, my Decovil Heavy just came out. You're gonna want some glue. Always have this on hand too. It's not interfacing, but you need it. If you don't have it in your sewing room, you need it. It's Beacon 3-in-1 glue. It's amazing. It's our Band-Aid. It's gonna fix everything. So what you're gonna do is, like, let's say you're shoving it through. I can't even pull this off now. This is a good fuse here. But let's say you're shoving it through and like a big chunk of it came off and you're just like, no. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take your Beacon 3-in-1 glue, you're gonna put it on the back side of the Decovil Heavy, and then you're just gonna stick it down, put it down somewhere, give it a few minutes. If you've reached that point in the bag making process where you are turning the bag out and your interfacing is coming undone, you are probably in a pretty stressed out place in that moment. So you're gonna let that glue dry and sit, and you're gonna go get yourself a glass of water, a glass of whatever you need, and then you're gonna come back, okay? And that way, everything is good to go. It's stuck. Continue on. So, this is just kind of like a go-to for any of these firmer interfacings. Use your glue. So since we're talking about Decovil Heavy, let's talk about another type of interfacing that a lot of people say, hey, you don't have Decovil Heavy, use this instead. It's just as good. And they are lying. That's Peltex. Okay, this is, let me see the number. This is Pellon, and it is 71F, and it is called Peltex. Ultra firm. And I started out with Peltex before I started using Decovil Heavy, but it is a mess. It does not want to stick to anything. Like that glue, I don't know if it's just because the glue's not that good or if because like this is just way too firm. I mean, you see it's like a piece of plastic. It's very, very firm. It's not, I wouldn't suggest it as a fusible material. However, I do use Peltex as a non-fusible material, and it's great. So if you have a pattern where you can kind of slip in a really firm piece of interfacing, Peltex is going to be great because it's very, very firm. If you really want to use it, just make sure you have your glue to go with it. That's my only suggestion, so that's all I'm going to say about the Peltex. All right, next, this is some interfacing I seem to have a lot of, but I rarely ever use. This is Pellon Featherweight. This is 911FFW1. And apparently I never remember that I have it because you can see I've purchased this in bundles. And then I even got a bolt of it on 3 separate occasions. So what I've seen this used in and what I've used it in are like wallet patterns. It's kind of similar to like a woven interfacing, like an SF101, but it's a little bit lighter. And it's not breathable. Like it doesn't have a woven backing. It's not very breathable. It's good for wallets. That's what I've seen it good for. It's good for wallets. It's gonna provide a little bit of structure, a little bit of help. Honestly, this was one of the questions I saw. Honestly, if I was making a t-shirt quilt where you cut out squares from all your t-shirts and then sew them all together into a quilt, I would probably use Featherweight because I feel like it would be easy to piece together using featherweight, and it would add structure so you don't have to worry about the squares of your t-shirt stretching and getting all messed up. But it's also light enough that I feel like it would still feel like a comfortable quilt. You know, you don't want too much firmness on your quilt. So I have it because I have used a couple patterns that called for it, but I don't like reach for it naturally. So again, this is one of those, if the pattern calls for it, just get as much as you need. Don't get a bolt. And then just make sure you have it, because I always forget that I have it. Okay, remember how I said that if you have quilt cotton, no matter what, always attach with woven interfacing, the Sewfuse or the SF101 to it before you do anything? I lied. Unless you're making like card slots for a wallet. I should have mentioned that, I apologize. If you're using Craftfuse, you don't normally add any sort of SF101 woven interfacing. So this is Pellon Craftfuse, and we're going to talk about another type in just a moment. But this is Craftfuse, oh no, I can't read it, 8081. You can see I do buy this by the bolt. I also have another bit of it here. Craftfuse is so good for card slot pockets because Craftfuse, it's like paper. It's so cool. It's like paper. Let's play with it a little bit. When you heat it up, it's super gummy and like, it's just really flimsy floppy, but then when it hardens, when it cools, it crisps up like paper. So that means you can fuse it to your material, and then you can kind of like muck up your material to whatever shape you need it to be, and then let it cool, and it will stay like that. I love it. But if you're making a wallet with card slot pockets, you don't want to add the SF101 to those card slot pockets. It's going to just be too thick, and you don't need it. So here we go. We've got a piece of our quilt cotton again. Let me just get it nice and flat. Craftfuse fuses best from the front of the fabric. So instead of fusing it from the back, if you have to fuse it from the back, because let's say you have markings or something and it's centered, if you have to fuse the Craftfuse from the back, which I do often have to do, I'm going to show you how to do this. You're going to put it so that the glue shiny side is down against the back of your material. And then once again, you're going to grab your pressing cloth. So anything except a woven interfacing, I do suggest using a pressing cloth. Because if you don't know how your iron's going to do with it, you don't want to find out that it didn't turn out well. You know what I mean? Like, that's a pain. Ugh, it's such a pain when you get gunk all over your iron. So now watch I got it all nice and hot and steamy. So it's really like mushy. So what you can do now is fold it however you want, you know, like that. Do something like that. And give it another press. It's very mushy. Very nice. And then oftentimes I'll put a ruler on top of it or just something with a little bit of weight, you know. Let it cool. Because if you are folding a bunch of card slot pockets with the Craftfuse and then you just yank it up and you're like, nothing's staying put. This is a mess. Don't do that. Get it formed the way you want. Get it nice and hot. Put something, just hold it for a little bit. Let it cool down. Because you see, once it cools down, it's nice and firm. It has that nice paper-like quality. Oh, beautiful card slot pockets. I do love that. Card slot pockets on wallets are a little tricky because it is such a thin piece of material. If you don't add any interfacing, over time, they're just going to get kind of smushed in. You're going to put your card in and it's just going to smush it down. It's like, oh, this is, again, one of those things where this makes it more custom made rather than handmade. You know, it makes it more of like a legit wallet versus like a just for fun project, you know? I don't know. Craftfuse is a great, great product. I do love it. So I mainly use Craftfuse on card slot pockets and then sometimes also for the lining of a wallet. So recently when I was introduced to Sewfuse, I was introduced to Monica, who sells the Sewfuse. She also was selling Sewfuse Plus. What's that? So she described it as a kind of replacement for Craftfuse without the problem of the wrinkling. So with Craftfuse, you can have a similar problem as you do with Fusible Fleece where the material starts kind of wrinkling up. And in Sewfuse Plus, you're not going to have that problem. And she is right. It is fantastic. Sewfuse Plus is also something, and she said, if you double it up, you have kind of like a Decovil Light fuse. I've never tested it. Let's test it. So I'm going to cut out a little strip of my Sewfuse Plus here. Okay, so I'm going to cut this in half so we can double it up, but I also want to see what it's like just on its own. So let me grab a piece of material. I'm out of my brown material, so we're going to have to use some Christmas trees. So let me just cut a piece of our tree. And as always, make sure you give your material a good press, flatten it out before you start attaching interfacing to it. Okay, so because I can, I'm going to just attach this to the back of my material and then fuse it from the front. There we go. Okay, so now I have this attached. That is lovely. So I'm gonna give it one fold real quick. I'm just gonna use one fold and press down that fold. Here we go. I'm gonna let that cool just to see if it's a similar feel to Craftfuse. So yeah, I mean, you can see with the Craftfuse, there is a bit of like a wrinkling to my material. It's a little wavy, but then with the Sewfuse Plus, none of that, no wave. Nice, clean fold right here. I do like that. I will say that the Sewfuse Plus fold is a little bit thicker, a little bit bulkier than the Craftfuse fold. The Craftfuse fold really feels like kind of like a folded piece of construction paper, real sharp. And then the Sewfuse Plus fold, it also has a really nice firmness to it, but it is just a little bit thicker. Now, let's add another layer of the Sewfuse. Where did it go? Dang it. Let's add another layer of the Sewfuse Plus to the back. Now, I don't know, should we adhere it from the back or the front? Let's try adhering it from the front and see if it sticks. There we go. See, it gives me all the steam when it's up, right? I don't need it then. I need it when it's down. It's fine. Okay, so Decovil Light, 2 layers of the Sewfuse Plus. I would say it's even more, like it's not as thick as the Decovil Light. Like the thickness of the Decovil Light, it's more thick than the 2 layers of Sewfuse Plus, but I would say it provides an even better structure. That's interesting, isn't it? Well then, we're going to have to try that out in a bag. I'm excited about that. So I will try, whenever I'm going to use Decovil Light in another pattern, I will try using 2 layers of Sewfuse Plus instead. I love that structure. I wonder too, like when you crinkle it, because that's the thing, it's like if your bag is like mushed around a little bit, you know, is that going to cause the wrinkles? Because that happens. Let's just try it. Oh no, it's better. So here's like a wrinkly, here's a wrinkly Decovil Light piece. Here's a wrinkly Sewfuse Plus. Ooh, I'm excited about this. Monica told me this is what it was. I just haven't tried it yet. I'm excited about that. So I would add Sewfuse Plus to your list, especially if you don't find Decovil Light or if you just don't want to try Decovil Light. Try Sewfuse Plus. I ordered 10 yards of it. I'm going to use it. I'm excited about it now. All right, guys. Next up, I don't even know why I have it, honestly. I don't even know I have a bolt of it. This is Decor Bond, Pellon 809. I honestly probably had a pattern. I'm trying to look at the cutout to see if I know which pattern piece it was. I probably had a pattern that called for it, and so I got it. But I don't know what I would compare it to. I mean, I would kind of compare it to Craftfuse. But yeah, I don't know. Do you use 809? If you use 809, let me know what you used it for. I bet I used it for a wallet. That's what it feels like. It feels like I used it for a wallet. So it's probably very similar to Craftfuse, which is 808. I mean, 809, 808. It's probably similar. All right, next up. Batting. Why on earth would you use batting? Well, because batting is nice for a quilted bag. Again, if you're going for that like quilted look on your bag, that really comfy overnighter bag, duffel bag, things like that, batting is a great alternative to Fusible Fleece. Now, Fusible Fleece is similar. It's fleece, you know, with glue on the back of it. And if you're quilting it really heavily, that glue might not agree with your needle and with your machine. So if you don't want to do that, you don't have to. You can always go old school quilt route, and you can use some batting. Just use a temporary light spray adhesive to attach it to the material you're going to be quilting it on. Give it a quilt, cut out your pattern pieces. Batting is a great option, again, if you just don't want to, mess with Fusible Fleece or foam. If you don't want the thickness of the foam, you don't want the stickiness and the headaches of Fusible Fleece, batting is a great option for your bags. I don't see enough people using it. I highly suggest you do. And the last kind of obscure thing I have is Insul Bright. So this is like fleecy with like a metal foil in between it. Pot holders, oven mitts, things like that. If you wanted to make anything that's going to have a lot of heat coming into it and you want to protect your hands from the heat, this Insul Bright is great. I just had a bunch of it, so I thought I would show you. But I mean, if you were making, you know, it'd be cute, like a bag. If you were making like a travel bag for food, you know, like I know when we're taking food over to my mom's house or something, we'll put the, you know, we want to put it in something that keeps the heat in there. So maybe we should do that. We should find a fun pattern, right? That like you can like zip up and put your casserole in there, zip it up, have a handle. Let's do that. Let's find a fun pattern for that, and we'll use this. All right, next I wanted to talk about a different type of interfacing that I recently purchased. This is called Fuse. It's from Emmeline Bags, and they have 3 different varieties. I ordered a little bit of all of them just so I can check it out. So let me read to you what they all are. It comes with a thing. They're all woven. They're all woven interfacings. So you have the light version, which is this here, and it's good for quilt weight cotton. It's very similar to Shapeflex, Pellon SF101, Sewfuse. This is just another great woven interfacing option. And then there's the medium weight, which they said is great for like credit card slots. So this would be similar to the Sewfuse Plus or to Craftfuse, things like that. So that looks like another great option for that material. And then last, they have the heavy option, which they say is similar to a Decovil Light, which is fantastic. So I am gonna try out one small cut of each of these, and we'll compare them to the things they say we can compare them to and see what we think. Okay, so here is another scrap piece of quilt cotton. Okay, so let's cut off a small piece of their light, which is supposed to be similar to a Shapeflex. It has a really nice feel to it. It already feels better than Pellon Shapeflex. It reminds me of like the Sewfuse because it feels nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and just adhere it from the back, and then we can also adhere it from the front. I'm just gonna be careful not to get my iron on the glue. Okay, I'm gonna let that set for just a moment, let it cool off, and then we'll see how it feels. I'm gonna grab another scrap piece of material, and we're gonna try the medium, which is supposed to be similar to like a Craftfuse. And once again, we're gonna fuse this from the front. And I'm not attaching any sort of woven interfacing to this piece here. Because again, I wouldn't use Craftfuse and woven interfacing together, at least not the projects I've done, but that could be a really cool combination to try. All right, so I don't see any of like the wrinkles like we get with Craftfuse, so that's great. So I'm gonna let that one cool as well. And now I'm gonna grab the woven interfacing one, and yeah, this feels really nice. Let me trim off the edges so we get a good idea of how it feels. Yeah, so the woven interfacing the light, that feels really, really nice. So I would say this Fuse, the light, or the Sewfuse, those are great options, and I would pick those over Pellon Shapeflex. But if they're not options for you, or if you just need it right this moment and there's a Joann's right there, go get the Shapeflex. You're gonna still be happy. These are just kind of, in my opinion, a little bit nicer. So now let's try the firmer interfacing, which is supposed to be similar to a Decovil Light. And if I was working with Decovil Light, I would always use it over my woven interfacing first. So that's what I'm gonna do here. Let me grab my piece that has that light on it already. And so here is the heavy. And I'm just gonna adhere it from the front. Let me trim it down so I don't get any of this glue on my iron. All right, now let's press this. Steam and heat. Hot and steamy. You know what I want to know? Can I press it from the back? That's the thing about Decovil Light, because it has that paper backing. You can press it from the back, but I've never had very good results when I did that, so I'm interested if I can press this from the back, because to me that's an advantage. All right, I'm going to let that cool for just a moment. So let's go back to the medium weight, which is supposed to be similar to Craftfuse. I'm going to pinch it. That's kind of like my go-to with Craftfuse is, you know, card slots. So I'm going to pinch it and just get it a little warm. I don't need to get it super hot, and see how that feels. All right, so let's give this Craftfuse stuff all a good try. So this is Craftfuse, and it's got that really sharp firmness on the card slots. It's nice, we like it. And then this one was one layer of the Sewfuse, which again is a little bit thicker than the Craftfuse, but it still has a nice crispness to it. You will also have to top stitch on this. That's the one thing Craftfuse I feel like has an advantage on. I mean, you should always top stitch your card slot pockets, but to keep that sharpness there, you don't need to. And then here is the medium weight one, which is also, it's very similar to the Sewfuse. I would say the medium weight Fuse is a little bit thicker, like the result of that fold over is thicker than one layer of the Sewfuse. So there we go with the medium weight. And now it's like, oh yeah, that feels nice. Okay, I like that. I like the EB Fuse Heavy. That is very similar. Here's Decovil Light. Hi there. Here's the EB Fuse. I like that. Wait, no, that's not it. Yeah, it is. Okay, so that's a layer of light EB Fuse and a layer of heavy EB Fuse. Okay, I like that a lot. I definitely like the heavy. So when it comes down to those three types of things, for your woven interfacing, your must-have, I would go with the Sewfuse or the EB Fuse Light. Those are both fantastic options. Shapeflex is also a great option if you need it quickly. I just think that those ones are better. And then for like a Craftfuse, I would say personally, so I really like the other ones, but I like Craftfuse a lot. I know that it can be a little wrinkly. I know it's not the prettiest, but you just, you could cut butter with that, you know, like it's just so firm and perfect. I love that. I do like the other options as well. I'm interested to try them in card slot pockets. I don't know. I really like Craftfuse 808. And then, but for Decovil Light, I love Decovil Light. You know I love Decovil Light, but in a heartbeat, I would definitely use 2 layers of the Sewfuse Plus or the heavy EB Fuse. This heavy EB Fuse is good. The EB Fuse with the light, like that combo, oh, look at that. That is nice. That feels like it feels like a nice leather, you know? I love that. All right, so I know that was long and extensive, and I hope the timestamps are helpful because you don't need to hear all of the rambling. I'm gonna go through a few questions real quick. So I reached out on social media for questions, so let's go through just a few of them, I think I've answered most of them. I had already read the questions before I filmed this, so I had them in my head already. But let's see if I missed anything. All right, so first question, layering, interfacing. For instance, my domestic could get through layers of Sewfuse Plus, but not Dec, which I think you mean like Decovil. Again, this is great because you know your machine so well. If you can't get through the layers of Decovil Heavy, Decovil Light, something like that, then you have to cut them out of your seam. You just have to trim them down. And so if it's a rectangular pattern piece, that's really easy to do because you can measure it and then you can subtract 3/8 of an inch from each edge, 1/4 of an inch, whatever you need. If it's a curvy pattern piece, then you will have to kind of like take a small ruler. So I would take like a small ruler and just kind of go around the curves, you know, and just mark 3/8 of an inch down. And then I would cut my pattern piece so it's smaller. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, I have an industrial machine, but there are times even with that where it just doesn't make sense to have really thick interfacing in the seam. So even for that one, I will cut down interfacing. Even though I can sew over it, just because you can sew over it doesn't mean it's going to look good in the end, because the more layers of interfacing in a seam, the bulkier those seams are going to be, the more pressure that's going to put on your thread. So you got to think about all of that. It's not just like, my machine can get through it or my machine can't get through it. Do you want it to? You know, do you want all those layers in the seam? Because that's putting a lot on the thread and then also on the integrity of the bag. So if your machine can't go through it, you gotta just cut it out. You can still use it. You can still use all the fun interfacing. You just have to cut it out of the seam allowance. Okay, somebody asked my thoughts on the EB Fuse. I think it's all great. I love it. I love all the EB Fuse. I really do. I think it's fantastic. I would 100% suggest it. There's a lot of new interfacing coming out. There's a lot of small businesses selling new interfacing, which is amazing, because the last thing, like the worst thing is when you sold out. You have one option and it's all sold out and now you can't make anything. That's terrible. My personal preference is I like to buy it from folks who I know are bag makers. So for example, Monica. Whenever Monica started selling the Sewfuse and Sewfuse Plus, I didn't hesitate at all. I didn't question if it was going to be any good. Monica is an amazing bag maker. My everyday bag that I wear every single day was made by Monica. I bought it from her. So I trust her. If she says like, this is good stuff, I'm buying it. You know what I mean? Like you have certain people maybe on YouTube or Instagram, bag makers, that you just trust them, and if they like it, then you don't even like really question if it's going to be good. Versus brands that I've never heard of, people that I've never heard of that I don't even know if they're sewers or not. You know, that's where I'm a little bit more hesitant, because the product might be great, but I like buying it from people who use it a lot. You know, so that's why I would suggest definitely the EB Fuse comes from M-Line Bags. They're like bag making experts and everything, and then Monica, of course, who's just like super professional. Share everything you know, please. I have done my best at that. Hopefully this video is not actually 2 hours long because we're going on 2 hours now. Can you use something else in place of Decovil Light? Yeah, we have lots of options here, right? I didn't even know about that. 2 layers of the Sewfuse Plus, 1 layer of the Fuse Heavy. Those are great, great, great options to use instead of Decovil Light. I think those are phenomenal. Why do some interfacings bubble when I iron them? Again, it has to do with the chemical reaction of the glue and the heat and the material. Always read, especially if you buy some Pellon products, they will have fusing instructions on there. So always read the instructions. If you buy it online, there should also be instructions for fusing it online. So I'd love to know how to get the non-woven medium weight interfacing smooth, please. I'm assuming you're talking about like Craftfuse. Again, moving it around a lot, keeping it nice and hot, just moving it around, and then looking at other options as well, like the Sewfuse Plus or the Fuse medium weight. I think those would also be great options. But just like with Fusible Fleece, anything that's starting to bubble, you just want to keep the iron moving. You want to kind of put pressure and keep the iron moving. So a lot of this, why does it unstick? Tips for getting the iron-on type to stay ironed on. Many times mine lift up after I start sewing. You didn't fuse it long enough. That's my only tip that I have, because I used to have that problem all the time. I would just fuse it on once. I would fuse it on once from the back when I was like putting it on my pattern pieces, and then I was off to the races. I started sewing and started making, and then it bubbles off, and I was so mad. Once I became really, really digital, like I am on it when it comes to fusing my interfacing. I will fuse it really, really, I mean, you take the time. You fuse it for a long time on the back, you cut it out, and then you fuse it from a long time on the front. You just double fuse it, or use a heat press. Heat presses help a lot, but even then with heat presses, I do end up still having to fuse it again because it will come off. So you just have to take that extra time to really, really over fuse it on, and then you won't have to worry about it bubbling up. Ever since I started doing that, I haven't had a problem with the material coming off. So this one is, if a bag has a vinyl base and you want to use quilt cotton, what interface can you use for support? Decovil Heavy. Decovil Heavy for sure. Peltex, maybe? I mean, you can use Peltex, but you're going to want to glue it on. I don't know. If you're going to use Decovil Heavy or Peltex with a quilt cotton base, you want to beef it up first with your woven interfacing. So your Sewfuse, your SF101, whatever you're going to use for your woven interfacing, definitely layer that, and then do the layer of the Decovil Heavy or the Peltex. So what is your overall favorite brand? So many. You can't really pick a favorite brand. I love Craftfuse from Pellon. I also, obviously, Pellon's the only place I know selling Fusible Fleece, so I do enjoy their Fusible Fleece. I really, really love the Sewfuse and Sewfuse Plus options. I think I'm going to definitely love the Fuse. From what I just tested with, I love that. So I think working with that is going to be fantastic as well. The best is going to be whatever you have available to you, right? So I know, like I said at the beginning, I forgot the name of the brands, but it was like Vilene. There's a lot of different brands in other parts of the world. I can't answer how they compare to what we have. But just know that interfacing is like a big deal now. I feel like there's always just been like one option we all had for so long, and now all of a sudden there are all these small businesses coming out with all these great options. I'm excited for that because it's just better for us as bag makers, right? They're fusing better, they're sticking better, they're not rippling, they're, easier to work with, they look nicer in the end. Bag makers are the ones testing it out and deciding which ones they're gonna sell. I love that. Like, I just love that. I don't know. So I don't have a favorite. I'm a big fan of just buying whatever I see, but I gotta use up what I have first. So yeah, I would definitely suggest like the Fuse and Sewfuse, go check those out. And then of course Pellon products are always great because Pellon is a fantastic brand. They know what they're doing and they have all of the options. Okay, so how do you actually attach Decovil Heavy? I can't find any info on temp, time, etc. I use a heat press. Okay. Ooh, I don't know the temp time and all that stuff either. I'm assuming Pellon should have information about that. Now, when you're using heat presses, it's all a little different. I love my heat press, but at the same time, I like the control I have over an iron. So, Decovil Heavy, like I said, you want to fuse it from the front of the material if you can. If you're using vinyl, you can't do that. If you're using vinyl, you're going to fuse it from the back of the material. Lots of heat, lots of steam. you can hold an iron down on this stuff for 30 seconds and it won't burn your material, at least in my opinion. And then also, you know, a pressing cloth if that's what you need. I know with the heat press, it's a little bit difficult to do the steam step, but with some of this stuff, you just really need that steam. Peltex, an alternative I can use if I can't find Decovil Heavy. Put the Peltex away. Best way to fuse without a heat press with an iron and a lot of steam. Hot and steamy. Hot and steamy is it's gonna fix a lot of problems. Best way to fuse with regular iron on each type. Okay, we went through that. Do you ever double up the interfacing? For sure. Definitely. And play with that idea. Like, I'm really interested in doing some SF101 and Craftfuse together. I'm wondering, like, I obviously wouldn't use that for card slots, but I'm wondering what I could use that for. Yeah, do you ever use one piece of fabric with 2 different interfacings? 100%. SF101 and etc. Like woven interfacing and blank. Always. See, is there an interfacing in between SF101 and Decovil? Yeah, I would say Sewfuse Plus is a great in-between for that. It doesn't have the really, really harsh crispness of a Craftfuse, so I would say that would be a good in-between. The Sewfuse Plus, I think, would be great. So it says, I know there have been many new retailers to the market. I wish I knew what is comparable to what. So the nice thing is, especially with the EB Fuse, they have a little card that came with it. And on their website, it says too, they'll tell you what it's comparable to. So will Monica. Like, they'll tell you what this is pretty comparable to. And I would suggest any retailer that's going to be selling interfacing that you do have a comparable to a Pellon product. Because Pellon's been the thing we've all known and loved forever. So yeah, they usually will say like, hey, this is comparable to, you know, a Craftfuse or comparable to a Decovil Light or Shapeflex, things like that. What's the substitute for Decovil Heavy? If you have Decovil Light, layer it twice. That's what you do. If you have Decovil Heavy is just twice the thickness of Decovil Light. So if you don't have Heavy, 2 layers of Decovil Light, you'll be great. What's the best Decovil Light dupe? So yeah, so Decovil Light shortages are a thing, aren't they? 2 layers of Sewfuse Plus or 1 layer of EB Fuse Heavy. I think you're going to be good to go. All right, I think I've answered most of the questions. If I didn't, make sure you leave them down below. I will be going through the comments. My camera is overheating and turning off over and over again because it is way too hot and steamy in here. I gotta go do something with my hair because, again, the curls came out. I hope that this was informative for you guys. I hope that I answered questions. Like I said, I am definitely no expert. I am no chemist. I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but I have a pretty good idea of how this stuff works because I use it so much, and I just hope it was helpful. If you have any other tips or tricks, questions, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. I think that this is going to be a really great resource for information. Once I get new interfacings, I'll always let you know, and then I'll try them out in bags and patterns. I'm really excited to try more EB Fuse, and you're going to see some more of that in the channel. And of course, Sewfuse is amazing. Go grab it while you can because it is very, very popular. I hope that you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.